Welcome to my channel, folks. I got this pruning knife here. Everything's loose on it. It needs a desperate rescue. I picked up at a local antique store here for only $5. This is a Klein Tool Chicago pruning knife. I'm going to give it a total restore, new scales. I'm going to make a new brass liner lock in the middle there. And I get on with it. Here next on Kodiak Edge. Okay, up front here, sometimes I'll use a razor blade, sometimes I won't. It depends on how small the knife is. Smaller knives I use razor blades all the way through. I don't drill nothing out, I don't grind nothing out. I bust it out with a blade, a razor blade. It's the safest, best way to do it. You don't overwork the holes on the bolsters. Here I got a used pocket knife blade. It's a hardened blade, so it has no problem cutting through these pins. A few taps and it goes right through it. I take all my knives apart with a used blade usually. Like I said, I don't grind or none of that stuff. I mean, that's for rookies. You do that, you're gonna mess up the areas of the scales and the bolsters. When you put new pins in, you're gonna have gaps and it's not pleasing and you can't change it. Well, that's how I take these knives apart. These used blades are hardened already, so they'll cut through these nickel and brass pins with no problem. Doesn't take me long. It usually takes me about a minute and a half, 2 minutes at the most to take a knife apart completely. Most guys will use Dremel tools and drill presses and they'll spend 10-15 minutes taking it apart. Okay, here I'm just using a Dremel tool just to cut the pins out so they're easier to knock out with pin drive. My anvil here. I got a slot cut in my anvil here for the pin drive. One more pin here to knock out. There she is. Now here you see me pounding this liners flat. They always get a little bent when you take the knife apart. You just use a ball peen hammer on the flat side and it makes them completely flat. They're good to go when you're done peening them. They don't have to be hot. Just put them on the flat anvil and hit them with the flat part of the hammer and they go back to being completely flat and nice and straight. Okay, here's the parts. Everything's taken apart, disassembled, flattened out. Ready to go for a rust solution bath. That'll be next. Okay, here I got 9% white vinegar. I already put some vinegar in here already. I'm just topping it off, and I'll put all my metal parts in here and start the derusting solution. And these parts can sit in here 10 to 12 hours. 10 minimum. After about 12 hours, take them out. Then you want to neutralize the acidity from the vinegar by putting, when you go to clean it after 10 to 12 hours, you'll neutralize it with baking soda. Here coming up next. Okay, it's time to trace out and make my new line lock. The original liner lock had a cut in it, and it was worn down to the point where it wasn't locking the blade too tight. It's time to make a new one. Here I'm drilling all the holes out for it. There's several different holes for holding the scales on and painting the blade in the rear end, fore and aft. This is the lever slot, the lock lever slot. Drill that out. And here it is. Okay, I'm going to cut this thing out with a angle grinder here. Get it ready to take it to the belt sander and sand it down in shape. Watch other videos of people doing these projects, especially the restoring guys. They restore just about everything. They don't say anything. Make you guess everything they're doing, basically. I like to explain this for you all. Here she is. The final details in here, and then I'll file out that liner lock. Okay, using the Dremel tool here, I'm cutting out that liner lock slot. And like I said, I'll use the jewelers. And here's the end result. The old and with the new. See here on the left, where it stands proudly up a little bit, gives it a spring action so it locks onto the blade when you open the blade. It pops up. Blade rides over the top of it, pops up. Okay, time to cut out the scales for the handle. This is an ironwood, by the way. It's very tough wood. It won't crack when you peen onto it like other woods will. It's tough. It's a tough wood, that's for sure, and it's a lot more. It's way more aesthetically pleasing to the eye than walnut that was on it before. Now I'm going to cut all the way down. Yeah, you saw I ain't going to cut it. I turn this around here, you'll see it's not deep enough. So I got to get out the big boy here. This will go all the way through the bottom. I'm doing this by hand, just to show you it can be done by hand. Usually I'll use my bandsaw. Okay, now it's time to shape them in a 2-inch grinder, and I'll sand these down to within a 1/16 or better around the trace line. You don't want to cut these exact. You can always sand the edges down when the knife's assembled to get a perfect fit. Okay, you can see here I put the liner back in place on the scale that I cut out and sanded down. I got an 1/8 inch all the way around it. Gives me plenty of room for when I go to super glue these down to drill the holes out. It's right in place where it needs to be when I drill it. Okay, here I'm adding some baking soda, a little bit of vinegar in here, neutralize and clean off this rust by hand. I got some double aught steel wool here, and I'll scrub them all down and get most of the rust off. Alright, here's a rust treatment that I like to put on it. A lot of guys skip this stuff, they don't use it, but I think it's necessary and I like to use it. You don't have to, but I do. Okay, on to sanding. I'll sand all these metal parts down. I ain't really sanding too much on the parts where the scales are going to meet it, and then I'll get on to sanding the blade. Most of the details here on this blade. I'll sand this 2500 grit, and I'll put it on the buffer. Alright, it's at 2500 grit and it's time for the buffer. And get this thing running. And get me some white compound here, some white jeweler's compound. This gives you the finest buff. And I'll buff this up and get a nice little mirror finish on it. There she is, shining pretty good. You will never get this pitting out of these blades. I'd have to make a new blade if I wanted it to look completely mirror finish. All right, time to drill out my holes. This is the bail hole in the back, the biggest hole of them all. And I'll switch out my blades or my bits, pardon me. And now I'm doing the rocker bar hole and then the pin holes for holding the scales on. All right, time to get sanding on this last scale. I did the first one already. Get this sanded down and get it down to the bolster and round it over on the edges. Get it close, and then I'll take it away from it with 80 grit by hand. Shape's coming along nicely here. Okay, I got some 80 grit here. Get it close to the exact shape I want it. I got a little bit of a gap there. I'm going to fill that with some super glue. But as it dries, it'll fill up the sawdust and fill the gap. Don't need much, just a little bit. Hey folks, I want to take this time to mention, please like and share my video. Sharing my video goes a long way, and it'll help me reach my goal of getting 1,000 subscribers here soon, hopefully. And I'm gonna have a big giveaway when I hit 1,000 subscribers. So I'm gonna have 4 different places where you can win 4 different prizes. Thank you, and thanks for your time and support. This here is what you call a cabinet scraper. It's used commonly in woodworking and cabinet building. It eliminates 80% of sanding. When you sand these scales or any wood and you get them perpendicular lines in the wood that are visible, this cabinet scraper makes light work of it really quick. Saves you a ton of sanding. After that 80 grit, I go ahead and use this scraper, and I'll jump to like a 400 after this. It gets it so smooth. Believe it or not, you see these little shavings coming off. It's getting this scale baby ass smooth. See the shavings right there? Gets it real nice and smooth. I'll continue this a little bit and get all them perpendicular sanding marks out. Then I'll jump to 400 grit. I'll probably take this up to 1,000 grit, be done with it. Alright, here I've got this jeweler's file, round over file. I'm going to use it to ream out each one of these little holes. It's got an angled tip on it, so it's going to bore me out the top portion of these scales about 1 millimeter. So when I peen the pins in, they'll have a place to expand in and act like a nail head, keep these scales from ever popping up. They make different reaming tools for doing this. I haven't yet to buy a tiny set of them, but for now this jeweler's round over file works pretty well. Get these reamed out and time to peen them on. Okay, first of all, I'm going to get me a little boiled linseed oil here on a rag and apply some of these scales. I got these sanded up to 1000 grit. So we'll see pretty much what a finished look's going to look like here now. Looking pretty sweet. All right. Wipe this excess off here. Here's the finished look. Looks pretty nice. First off, I'm going to put these smallest pins in here that actually peen the scales to the liners. I got to get them just right length. Typically, your length should be a tad bit longer than the diameter of the pin that you're using. So the smaller the pin, the less diameter. You can see here. Okay, now when you're painting these, it's real tedious, especially with these really small and softer brass pins. You want to do a little peening on each side. I had them a little too long, so I shaved them a little bit. So now I'm going to peen a little bit on each side. Flip it, peen it, flip it, peen it. The trick here is to peen them down straight, and as you're peening, you want to keep that pin centered. And you see I'm angling the hammer to move it a little bit back over. But this brass pin now is expanding on each side more and more each time I peen on it. Once they're expanded, it'll fill the whole gap of the bored holes on each side, and you can sand them down flush with the surface. And since we made a nail head there, they'll never back up. I don't use epoxy on these scales. I just put them on with super glue and pin them down nice and tight, and they never come up. So you can see here, we got them sanded down pretty almost flush. Looking good. I'll do the rest of these now. Get the rest of the small pins in and get them ready to go. But now I'm going to put the small one in the front. Same process. Now it's time to put the liner in, the liner lock, the new liner lock I made from brass, and get the spring on the other side of the body together. And put the rocker lock, the rocker bar they call it, or rocker spring. Put that in here. Get ready to pin this together first. Give it some light taps till it seats just right. The blade will go in last. Get this all in lined up. I realized here I made a mistake. Good thing I didn't pin nothing together yet. I had to switch it around. I put the liner upside down on the opposite side of where the blade was going to be. So now I got it where it needs to be. Hey, I'm only a human, right? Sometimes you want to get this video done and get it together right away, and you lose track of where you're at. But yep, she seems to be in the right place now. So now I'm just going to show you, once I get this together here, short clips of me pinning this in. Same process, every pin that you pin, you want to keep it centered, take your time, pin it straight up and down, expand that metal. I'm going to use the nickel silver on the rocker spring, and I'll use the nickel silver on the blade. Same process. Pin it, flip it, expand that brass or steel so it fills that bored hole that you have on each side of the knife perfectly. Creating a nail head once again, so nothing will back up and come apart. Okay, lastly, before we get this thing buffed up and sanded down nicely, it's time to pin in the blade. Nickel silver pin. It's a work tool, so you don't want to use brass. You want something stronger, so the nickel silver is the way to go. Plus it matches the bolster. Put my shim in here, so when I pound it down, 1/1000th shim I made out of brass. And start painting it a little bit at a time on each side. Don't rush this. If you rush it and bend this pin as you're painting, you're gonna offset the scales. I've done that before. Periodically check it, stop and check it, make sure that everything's straight. See, I'm moving the hammer a little bit towards the front and back here. Keep it straight. Once again here. I got it nice and straight, then I'll use the painting side of the hammer. A little bit of time, folks. Just keep getting this until you get it nice and expanded into the bolster. I didn't have to ream the bolster. It was a factory ream already. All these knives are made with factory reams. Same process I'm talking about. It's closing nicely. I got the shim in there and a little bit no play. Okay, I'll get this peened up and ready to buff. Well, she's looking good, folks. Closing well. Everything's lined up well. There's hardly any play in that liner lock. Remember, I extended that brass piece a little bit longer because the old one was wore out. Falling into place nicely. Now some final sanding on this bad boy before we get to buffing her. Alright, time to put this bail on here and she's done. I kind of had a mishap in the shop, but the video must go on. I was going to sharpen the blade and it caught my belt sander and slung the knife across my room. And I kind of jarred it so much that I cracked one of the rear scales. So it is what it is, but off camera I'll take this thing back apart and put one more new scale on one side of the knife. Get it back together. I'm not going to have a mishap and leave it. But it is what it is, and overall she turned out really nice. And sorry the video's so long, but it's necessary, I guess, to get some of the detail in that I added these videos. I can make them in 12 to 15 minutes like most of these bigger guys, but they don't really say anything in the videos and they don't really tell you much of anything. So I think it's worth the time and worth the wait to see the whole process. But she looks pretty dang nice. You can see that crack there in the back. But like I said, it is what it is, and at least you get to see the knife finished here without waiting longer. And if you haven't subscribed, folks, please do so. I appreciate you watching. Okay, here's the before. Remember that liner lock wouldn't work, and it wouldn't seat all the way down on the knife, so I grind the kick so that when I reassembled it, it would be in it. And a lot of gaps, everything coming apart, starting to. It's been addressed. All new scales, new liner lock. And here's the after. Polished blade, new liner lock, seats nicely, new scales made from ironwood, bail cleaned up, no gaps for most. But there she is. If you haven't subscribed, folks, please do so, and like the video, and please share. Have a great day. Peace.